Welcome to Talk World Radio, a half-hour discussion of politics as if the people mattered. I'm David Swanson. This week on Talk World Radio, we are talking about war and peace and politics, and our guest is RootsAction's political director, Sam Rosenthal. Sam is an organizer and a researcher based in Washington, D.C. Both Sam and I work for RootsAction. Sam Rosenthal, welcome to Talk World Radio.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Let's talk a little bit about the Democratic National Committee, or the DNC. What is it? What does it do? And what did it do recently that was perhaps particularly shameful?
Yeah, so the DNC is sort of the fundraising apparatus for the Democratic Party. They don't shape policy for the party, but they do have a heavy hand in helping candidates run for office and determining where money's coming from, where money is going to within the party. And there's also a sort of brand building component to the DNC. They're not very visible from the outside, so unless you're sort of invested in the inside baseball of the Democratic Party or partisan politics more broadly, you wouldn't necessarily pay a lot of attention to the DNC, but they are quite influential. For example, we saw a few years ago the DNC that then had a different chair, but this is sort of indicative of the maneuvering they do. They changed the primary calendar for the presidential primaries so that South Carolina moved ahead in the primary calendar for Democrats. And this was a pretty naked giveaway to Joe Biden so that they could shore up Joe Biden's position in running for re-election in case there was anyone trying to primary him. This was a state that obviously is not important in the general election. It's a red state. It has not gone to Democrats for decades, but the DNC moved their calendar so that that state would be the first to vote in the primary. And this was just kind of a way of making sure that Biden didn't show any early weakness that maybe real contenders would have jumped on. So that's an example of the kind of behind the scenes maneuvering that the DNC does that has very real effects and implications in, who ends up being the party's nominee and who's running for office and things like that. So recently, at RootsAction, we try to watch the DNC and watch what they're doing and kind of read the tea leaves of what this means for the general direction of the party. So recently we have been paying a lot of attention to the DNC. They have a new chair, Ken Martin, who ran as a sort of reformer type. He calls himself a progressive. I don't think that many of us in the progressive movement agree with that assessment, but that's his name for it. But he ran on a reform platform. He was going to have a more transparent DNC. And some of the things he's committed to, they've held up. They live stream their meetings now, which they didn't used to do. There's sort of very incremental, slow progress on getting dark money out of the Democratic Party, but it's really a drop in the bucket compared to what many of us think they should be doing. Sort of nominal. They're paying lip service to this idea without really moving the needle. The thing we've really been watching, though, over the last couple of months is this vote on these competing Gaza resolutions. So there's a young woman, Allison Minnerly, who from Florida, she's 26, I believe, who wrote a very comprehensive resolution that basically said that the party completely disavows what Israel's doing in Gaza, that the party would commit to stopping weapons shipments, that was sort of the state official position of the DNC, was that we shouldn't ship weapons to Israel. Stuff that's really, recognizing that it's a genocide that's happening in Gaza, stuff that's very radical for the Democratic Party. And the party leadership freaked out, and they wrote a competing resolution that is sort of like J Street type language, that is very, we affirm the rights of the Palestinian people to a state. We affirm the rights of a two-state solution, but also we, the hostages need to come home. This is Hamas's war, rhetoric that we've seen from the party already. And the point of this resolution, we believe, was to blunt the much better resolution written by this woman, Allison Minnerly. So there was a vote at the last DNC meeting. Every other resolution, including the watered down one, passed unanimously. This resolution, the good, as we've been calling it, the good Israel resolution, did not pass. it was the only resolution that didn't pass unanimously. I mean, it didn't pass at all, but every other one passed unanimously. This was the only one that failed. And then at the conclusion of the meeting, Ken Martin, the chair, withdrew his competing resolution. So the party effectively ended, I'm sorry, the DNC ended with no position on what's happening in Gaza right now, no official position. So that's a very long way of answering that question, but that's what's happening there now.
Oh, there's a good answer. It's a very slick move, it seems to me, when you see a resolution come along that says, no more weapons to Israel, no more supporting this genocide. And presumably, from the polling that somewhere over 90% of people who call themselves Democrats support that sort of thing. You've got 8% in one poll of self-identified Democrats supporting the ongoing genocide. And instead of blocking it or barring it or forbidding resolutions, you just introduce a different resolution that has similar language but doesn't actually do a darn thing, and you get the votes for that one and not for the substantive one. And then at the end, you withdraw the other one too, so that nothing happened.
Right.
It seems very slick.
Yeah, absolutely. And to put a finer point on what you were just saying about the percentage of Democrats who support Israel right now, and those numbers are right, it skews dramatically with age. So we're seeing that, a subset of Democrats who are over 65 are somewhat more supportive of Israel and of Israel generally and of Israel's actions in Gaza specifically. That number has fallen off a cliff, just like all the other numbers have. But if you look at younger voters, that is, people who will be members of the Democratic Party potentially for a very long time, decades and decades and decades, they are completely rejecting Israel itself and particularly what they're doing in Gaza. So this is a myopic strategy by the party, on top of just being morally completely in the wrong, because these are the voters that it needs to keep in its column going forward to be a relevant party, and they're completely alienating them right now.
there there is change the subject slightly. There is a popular primary winning Democratic Party candidate for mayor of New York who's willing to disagree with the Israeli government now and then. And that seems to be, again, very, very popular, a potentially winning strategy. What's been the response from the Democratic higher ups?
Yeah, so this is, Zoran Mamdani, who's completely blew Andrew Cuomo out of the water in the Democratic primary. He's now running in the general against Cuomo again, who can't take no for an answer, as we've seen in many arenas of life. Eric Adams, the incumbent mayor, who's polling at under 10%, and Curtis Sliwa, sort of perennial Republican candidate who's a real New York character. But none of these candidates are viable. It's clear that absent some real machinations by the wealthy in New York, that Zoran is going to win. He's going to be mayor. He's the official nominee of the Democratic Party. And despite that, we have not seen the leadership of the party endorse him. And that includes Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who will be his constituents when he's mayor. These are people who live in New York City and are unwilling to endorse this person. He's 33 or 34. He's very charismatic. He knows social media. He's the kind, he's being mobbed on the street in New York. He can't go anywhere. He's so popular without people taking pictures with him. This is the kind of person who, on paper, you think the party would be over the moon about. It's exactly the kind of person they want. But his policies are left, and he has said that he does not believe in the idea of an ethno state. He said that he doesn't believe that we should continue to provide weapons to Israel, that they're waging a genocide, and so this makes him a pariah within the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And so neither Jeffries nor Schumer have endorsed him yet. Kathy Hochul, the governor, came out and did endorse him over the weekend, somewhat surprisingly, that she beat Jeffries and Schumer to the punch. But this just seems like a kind of naked electoral calculus on her part. At least she's smart enough to know which way the wind is blowing, though. We can say that in her favor.
Yeah, it took her forever, but she's still
Yeah,
faster than those other guys.
right, right.
If okay, so I have a couple questions. One, to an ordinary observer, you take super popular issue positions like opposing genocide, like giving people decent stuff for their taxes in New York City, et cetera. And it seems to win. It seems to be a winning formula. Uh, why do the higher ups in the Democratic Party and in the DNC seem to prefer losing strategies? Why do they seem to have preferred Trump to Bernie, even though Bernie seemed like he was, polling to beat Trump in every
Yeah.
poll that paired them? Why do they seem to prefer supporting a genocide to winning elections? Where
Yeah.
did those priorities come from, or am I missing something significant?
No, that's totally right. I think this has been the modus operandi of the Democratic Party for a long time, is this constant triangulation between their donors and their base and what party leadership says. And the donors are people who we've seen many Democratic donors turn around and give money to Trump as well. These are ultra wealthy people. Many of them are tech scions. They're people who are interested in a sort of deregulatory environment, but maybe they have, progressive social stands. They support gun control abstractly. They support LGBT rights, etc. But these aren't people who are interested in bucking the system or interested in changing inequality in this country. They're mostly people who want lower taxes, but a kinder, gentler implementation of lower taxes. So, or one that doesn't come with a side of fascio nationalism or something like that. But really, it's the party's at a breaking point, the Democratic Party, and this is, I and others at RootsAction have been saying this, and people on the left, that they cannot continue to take millions of dollars from Reid Hoffman, for example, and also be a party that's speaking to their traditional base. During the Clinton years and subsequent to that, the party began this pivot that they've continued away from working class voters towards kind of educated suburban voters. But what we've seen over the years is that that's not a very reliable base for the Democrats. Those are people who, sometimes they'll vote with the Democrats, sometimes Trump looks really appealing to them and they'll vote with Trump. So they cannot build a new party on, as Chuck Schumer once said, picking up 2 votes in the suburbs for every vote they lose from a working class voter in a city or something like that. They need a strategy that is going to re-engage those voters. Otherwise, they're just going to continue spinning into obscurity. And listening to their donors has really not gotten them anywhere. But we're seeing the effects of it right now.
Individually, it may have gotten some of them some money, but
Right.
collectively, well, okay. I have one more question on this sort of topic, and that is, it seems like the opening for the crazy right wing politics comes from parties like the Democratic Party talking about housing and education and environment and retirement and healthcare, but then voters not really seeing much difference on those topics, seeing tons of money go to wars, but not that much come to them. If and this is where I think the governor of New York endorsing Mamdani is a very good thing, because he may need the state government's help on some things. But if he actually moves into Gracie Mansion and he's running New York City, what substantive changes can people in New York City expect to actually see? And might positive ones actually make a really big difference, bigger than him winning an election campaigning on such things?
Yeah, I think they certainly can. I mean, as you say, so much of the last few elections, and certainly the 2024 presidential election, were about affordability. It was a question, people felt like they were cash strapped. We had an inflation crisis right after COVID. We had an employment crisis after COVID. We're heading into another one, it appears, or some kind of stagflation crisis. And people are just concerned about affordability. And where the Democrats said, yes, you're right to be concerned about that, but they didn't really have a plan for what they were going to do to bring down costs. Donald Trump said, I'll do all this stuff that, he can't actually do, and I'll make everything cheap again, and I'm a businessman. And that resonated with people. And I think that we saw a similar message, but grounded in reality, in Zoran Mamdani's campaign, which was, the city's gotten too expensive. Working class people can't afford to live in New York. I used to live in New York. I know it gets more and more and more expensive. It's a constant ramp up. And so some of the things that I hope he implements early on, I think should really help. The childcare reforms, free childcare reforms should help. I have a young child. Daycare is incredibly expensive. My wife and I both work full time, and it's like having a mortgage on a house that you have to take out. So we feel cash strapped by that. People all over New York, I have friends in New York who also feel cash strapped by that. So that should make a big difference. There's these ideas that he will need the state's help with, obviously, but free bus service, city-run grocery stores, just kind of bedrock social spending that I think is actually hugely popular and is just lying there for the Democrats to take up as kind of the mantle of their social economic policy. That is, we're going to spend more money on you and on social welfare and less money abroad on wars, which was another resonant message that Trump picked up. He said, he's not doing it. I mean, it's the war machine as usual in this country, but he said, why are we sending all this money to Ukraine? We should be spending that money on Americans here. And I think people really liked that message. So I hope that on a local level, we'll see more of that in New York, that just policies that at root say it's good to spend money on people and on making their lives better. It's not a failing of a state if we're spending money on improving the material conditions people are living in. That's actually kind of the point of the state.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just my usual quibble. I think if we stopped the war spending, we could spend vast fortunes of treasure on people in the United States and on our fellow human beings abroad. We could send tons of money to help Ukrainians, just not to arm Ukrainians,
Yeah,
which isn't
absolutely.
helping Ukrainians. So uh, we're speaking with Sam Rosenthal, who is RootsAction's political director and who lives in Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump has played around with sending in the so-called National Guard on top of the ICE agents. And a lot of people in D.C. Have objected and resisted. What have you seen, Sam? What have people learned, and what, if anything, has Trump learned from this experience?
I'm not sure that Donald Trump is constitutionally capable of learning anything about anything, but I think there are two things happening at the same time, one of which fills me with dread and the other which fills me with hope. I'll start with the negative, which is that there's a huge militarized police and other presence that's really visible on the streets. I was out earlier today. I walked by a metro stop I walk by all the time, and there were 10 National Guard people with rifles standing outside of it. It's absurd. It's a complete overreaction to a non-problem. And now we are really living in what feels at times like a police state. The response that we'll see, whereas maybe we would have one or two police cars coming to some incident, I don't know what, on the street, it will now garner like 10 different emergency vehicles, 10 different services. You have CBP responding to, people drunk on the sidewalk. It's just a huge overreaction. And the climate is incredibly hostile. Residents are pushing back. People, are filming the police. They're filming any encounter that anyone has with law enforcement. And it's obvious that this makes law enforcement also really edgy about, they feel nervous about being filmed all the time, being pursued and followed all the time. So it's a very pitched and intense environment. I'm on many different sort of mutual aid and solidarity threads. That's basically, text threads, I should say. That's a constant relaying of different places where people are seeing arrests, people are seeing disappearances by ICE. It's really grim. And I think that people should really pay attention to this. This is the model that Donald Trump and people like Stephen Miller want to export to the rest of the country. They wanted DC. We have very few rights compared to states across the country. But if you think that's going to stop them, I think you should reconsider. It will not stop them. And so, just on the hopeful side, it's been really encouraging to see the solidarity that people have with their neighbors, the general feeling that DCers have that we're not going to lie down and take this. There are vigils and protests every night. That's not an exaggeration. You can drive around the city and see them on different corners. There are large ones, there are small ones. My neighbors go out and bang pots and pans every night at 8 p.m. But it's really heartening to see people banding together, standing up for people they don't know, people that they ordinarily never would have met on the street. And it's really across, socioeconomic class. It's across race. It's lots of different people coming together. So that's been very encouraging, and I think is a good model for how you stand up to this kind of assault on your rights.
There's been a lot of criticism of the mayor of DC being too
Yeah.
accepting of this outrage. And the latest I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, there's been some time limit reached, and she said, okay, now the time has expired, and the police should not cooperate with ICE. People should not support what ICE is doing any longer, which has led to a rant and a freak out by His Highness in
Yeah.
the White House. Is that where we are?
Yeah, that's where we are. I think that I, I've been one of the people criticizing her. I think she was far too accommodating of this from the get-go. She has, uh, and this is sort of true to her form, kind of vacillated between being more combative and more accommodating, depending on, I don't know what her advisors say to her day in and day out. But it's been a very incoherent general message from her. Some days it seems like she's oppositional, other days she's happy for the support of the federal government. And I think she should have just, planted her flag in, we're not going to take this from day one. And it would make the juncture we're at right now much easier for her to sell to people. But now we're kind of in limbo. I don't know what's going to happen. It's clear to me that Trump has no intention of removing the National Guard or sort of rescinding the carte blanche he's given to CBP and ICE and others, HSI, to just sort of run rampant in our streets. So what will happen? What will she do about that? I mean, the legal grounding for this has always been incredibly dubious. It's even more so now because the emergency period has elapsed, as you say. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't have a lot of faith in Mayor Bowser to be the sort of militant anti-Trump force that we need right now.
Yeah, it seems like maybe a greater weakness than resistance by local governments is the attitudes of the rank and file in the National Guard. You see all kinds of media reports of
Yeah.
frustration and upset morale and so forth.
Yeah.
And then you see Trump has an executive order to create his own personal military that won't be subject to any state governor
Right.
or legislature. Um, where do you think this is going to go?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell, I don't feel sympathy for these people, but on a human level, I think it must be awful day in and day out to be screamed at on the street by DC residents, which is what's happening to these people. People flip them off, people yell at them, they're constantly being followed and filmed. And I just think as a person, that's probably a very wearing experience if you thought this was going to be some kind of peacekeeping helping mission or something like that. It certainly is not that. And DC residents are really, really wanting these people to leave. So I'm not surprised to hear that morale is down. I mean, on top of this, National Guard has been picking up trash on the mall and things that are just really not what they expected to be doing, I don't think. And testament to the fact that there is not a rampant crime problem in DC that needs this level of militarized police response. We're just a city. We're a normal city with, yes, some crime, but mostly people living in harmony and going about their business. And so I think that it must be quite demoralizing to be on the streets here as a visible projection of this military presence. As for Trump's sort of private Praetorian Guard or whatever they are, I don't know. That's who he is. It's one of a billion crazy autocratic ideas he has. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. I never know. I don't bet on what will or won't happen in Trump world.
DC does not just not have a high burst of crime in recent weeks, but it's at something like a 30-year low
Yeah,
in violent crime, which
yeah,
suggests whatever we've been doing for the past 30 years, maybe do a little bit more of that, not a radically different, insane idea because of a supposed emergency, right?
Yeah. And, you know, the DC Council has been increasingly more progressive. Some of the things that criminal justice reformers have wanted, we've done, eliminating cash bail for non-serious crimes, things that allow people to kind of go about their lives, even when they're caught up in the criminal justice system here. They're not completely alienated from their communities, warehoused, caused to lose their jobs, you know, these things that precipitate more hardship in their lives. And I think those have been effective reforms. I mean, we've seen across the country that as those reforms are implemented, crime levels drop because the fabric of society is not so rent by this relentless warehousing and jailing of people. So it seems like that was a functional path to achieving lower and lower crime. As you say, it's at a 30-year low. But you know, this isn't a narrative that plays well with Fox News and right-wing media, and so they needed to create this boogeyman, and that's what they did.
Well, I hope National Guard recruitment is way, way down and that somebody puts out some ads that aren't, fighting forest fires and hurricanes, but actually
Right.
occupying your
Right,
fellow
right.
citizens and residents,
Yeah, yeah.
towns and neighborhoods. We got just a few minutes left. Sam Rosenthal, for those of you watching video, there's a big graphic behind Sam that says the Progressive Hub Show. Sam, for those who aren't familiar, what's the Progressive Hub and what's the Progressive Hub Show?
Progressive Hub is a progressive news website. We're a news aggregator with original content. And we sort of collect and post the best progressive news from around the web, as well as original articles and actions that you can take that correspond to those news stories. So if you're scrolling, you're doom scrolling, you're feeling frustrated that there's nothing you can do, we want to provide a portal into more action that you can take to address some of the things that we're reporting on. And the Progressive Hub News Show is our very occasional podcast that we have.
Which takes us back to the DNC. Was that the most recent Progressive Hub
I,
Show?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
The DNC had a meeting,
Yeah.
which most people don't even know is happening, but is hugely consequential, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, what we've got a couple minutes left. What should we be looking for coming up from the Progressive Hub and the podcast and from RootsAction?
Yeah, I think we'll keep following the DNC story and see where it goes. It's a very live issue, actually. There's a lot of discontent we're hearing with Chair Martin now, so we'll see if there's some kind of palace coup in the works or not. We'll certainly cover that. And I think we'll cover all of the DNC meetings going forward. Um, you know, if you want to follow this, but you can't stand to watch the dry live stream that the party sends out, you can follow us and hopefully we'll make it a bit more entertaining. We are also at RootsAction. We're currently working on a letter that we hope to have in a publication soon from Jewish academics and other Jewish American persons of note, decrying the use of anti-Semitism charges to attack free speech on college campuses. That's coming out timed with the beginning of the college semester here. Lots of kids are back in school over the last couple of weeks and probably encountering a very intense climate of scrutiny and censorship about what they're posting on social media, what they're writing in their college newspaper, and so on. And so we, of course, think this is absurd and ridiculous and obvious abrogation of their right to free speech. And we want to stand up against the Trump administration and also serve as a reminder to college administrators that they must defend the rights of their students against these attacks on free speech. It's been really, I think, galling and depressing to watch one college administration after the next roll over for Donald Trump when he comes for them. So we're hoping to combat that a bit.
I could not agree more. Would be wonderful. And I say that not very far here from the University of Virginia. Not that I'm naming any names or anything, but progressivehub.net, rootsaction.org, link there to a YouTube channel with lots of the videos from the past. We've been speaking with Sam Rosenthal, political director at RootsAction. Sam, thanks for what you're doing and for coming on Talk World Radio.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to have been here.
This is Talk World Radio. I'm David Swanson. Take action at rootsaction.org. Help end war at worldbeyondwar.org. Read or listen to today's Peace Almanac entry at peacealmanac.org. All past shows can be heard at talkworldradio.org. Talk World Radio is produced in Charlottesville, Virginia, and syndicated by Pacifica Network. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way.